Good afternoon, Sports Insanity Network fans. It's Mark Oldop, Sky Halpern, here with a special episode on the Sports Insanity Network. If you remember from last year, my good friend, brother, Michael Shields is back again for another episode of Coast to Coast, live from Denver, Colorado. How's everything going, Mike?
It's wonderful here in the Mile High. We are enjoying another just scintillating season of Colorado Rockies baseball. Uh, it's wonderful to have such an accomplished minor league team here in Denver. I'm sorry, a major league team here in Denver. But at least the hot dogs are good, and man, they're loaded potato. That's what most fans go to the Rockies games for, is the loaded potatoes. It's
The
wonderful.
loaded potato.
That's right. I mean, that's probably the most exciting thing going on. Although the Rockies have won their first two games coming out of the All-Star break, so who knows? Maybe they'll win out the rest of the season.
Could
So
be interesting. I'd also like to put that bet on FanDuel if I could and cash
that's
out on
right.
it, but I don't think the Colorado Rockies are pulling that off.
No,
But if you look at,
especially after they trade any of their players that are worth anything.
yeah, well, as you look at the hat on Mike's head, as you may or may not remember, Mike and myself grew up Mets fans, and we're both diehard Mets fans and also bringing our kids up Mets fans. But you've heard me and the guys on the network. It's time to get an outside opinion. And we were doing this last year, and then things got a little bit crazy. I had surgery, but now we're back and we're ready to go. So, Mike, as being a Mets fan watching from literally the outside in these days, what were the positives that you took away from the first half of the season?
I think that I think it's overwhelmingly positive, right? I mean, you didn't expect them to continue gangbusters like they were the first third of the season or whatever that was, and the fact that that's that second little piece of this, I'd really put it into three parts. Kind of so far, you have opening day through, I don't know, mid-June, give or take, right? And then best record in baseball, best ERA, best pitching staff. I mean, no contest. And then you have this short little period from mid-June to the end of June, worst record in the major leagues, right? And why? Was it because the team just got terrible? Not really. The pitching just fell apart for a couple weeks. And what you've seen this third, the last piece up until the All-Star break is um, I think maybe where they'll sit. I actually think they can improve. I think they're going to make some really important, not huge necessarily, but some trade acquisitions that will help. But look, they finished I think 8-5, 7-5. You also see this just explosion from Juan Soto. So we're seeing Juan Soto as he should be. I think you'll see Pete Alonso being a consistent producer, a little wrist thing now, but I'm not too worried. And I do think you can see some really strategic acquisitions. And right now, the Mets could, listen, if they really needed to, they could part with Vientos, Beatty, and Beatty in some really interesting deals. And you still have Ronnie Mauricio, or even part with Mauricio. But um, there's something about a switch hitter who we haven't seen his potential yet that's very interesting there. So I think, it's a long season. You have to say it's 162 games, right? And I tell my son this all the time. They have some really bad looking losses. And you're like, really? They lost two out of three of the Reds to start after the All-Star break? Oh, breaks your heart. Um, but that's baseball. Baseball is just so frustrating.
And that it is. It's also a game of patience. And Mets fans really didn't have to worry in the first third of the season, as Mike pointed out, how well they were doing in every category. But then what can happen in major league sports happen. Injury after injury after injury. And it wasn't to the Mets lineup, besides for Francisco Alvarez, the Mets rotation took hits left and right and basically had one consistent starter in David Peterson really the whole first half. But now we're coming back. We have Sean Manaea back. You're going to have Kodai Senga back. And then Mike led into it acquisitions. It's obvious pitching is where you got to focus. And Mike brought up something, the pitching in Colorado could be. we've been talking about Colorado as as a team for the Mets to call about. And the one we've talked about, Mike, is Kyle Friedland on the network. We've talked, me and Mike Rifkin, who are the Mets analysts, talked about bringing Kyle Friedland in. Now, I know you've been out to a few Rockies games, and I know you watched them on TV. What do you think of Friedland coming over to the Mets in some sort of deal?
It could be. It's interesting always to try to see what equates in terms of leaving Colorado. Obviously, it's sometimes tough being a pitcher in the Rocky Stadium, but I'd be more focused on like a Jake Bird from Colorado. He was, I mean, there was just something about the way I've been to a bunch of games, especially when the Mets were in town, and even against the Met. I mean, they killed them, they swept them, but there was some of Jake Bird's pitches just looked really crisp and nice, and I think he's younger. He may even be controllable for a little bit. Um, and listen, right now, what the Mets have going for them is even to bolster their bullpen, there are probably a lot of starters and relievers who would be happy to come from the team they're on to the Mets, both because they want to contend and their team will probably likely not be contending, but also because the Mets, I think, have turned a corner in a big way in terms of just, oh, I'm going to the Mets. That used to be kind of right? Whereas now, it's I think a decent guarantee that the Mets are always going to be competitive, and so you have a starting pitcher on a team, and that's why I always say like, what do you do with someone like Edward Cabrera, right? Not a huge possibility, but could be traded. And you don't have to. I don't think like. I don't think the Phillies are going to go after him. And so you're not competing with the Phillies for him. You're probably competing with the Cubs, maybe Toronto, maybe Dodgers, always the Dodgers. But would an Edward Cabrera come over and help fill a reliever role for them? Or be a starter, and maybe you had a sixth starter or who knows what, but it gives them flexibility. And man, his changeup is phenomenal. And so there's just so many possibilities. But then you have your bevy. I mean, Sandy Alcantara is another one, right? So you kind of look at the Marlins and see if one of those, and which one you have to have a conversation with them. Sandy Alcantara has been a little more of a wild card in terms of his performance this season, but sometimes, man, when you're playing for the Marlins, you might not be too excited. Same thing, Seth Lugo. I think he's definitely getting moved by Kansas City, and he'd probably be happy to come back to the Mets.
So you pointed out a few good names. Okay. Seth Lugo was a Mets reliever. Mets didn't want to transition him into the rotation. He left for greener pastures and now has settled with KC and has been almost unstoppable over the last 2 years. And I think he'd be a prime target to bring back to New York because one thing is he would be very friendly to the crowd. The crowd would love him instantaneously. You brought up Edward Cabrera, who, along with Sandy Alcantara, come in with the Marlins. Now, the Marlins have said if they're going to move Alcantara, they want Cabrera to be part of the deal. And that's a lot for any team to agree to take on two rotation pitchers. However, you have to hope that you're going after Alcantara because you're going to hope to see what he was before the Tommy John surgery and get that caliber of a player back. Edward Cabrera comes with a little control and maybe a little work with the Mets could help him with that fastball and slider that he does bring very well.
Yeah. And Lugo
Another
has, I
team,
mean, people forget that
yeah,
Lugo has like 8 or 9 pitches. I mean, this dude has just an arsenal, and it doesn't seem. I almost put him in the category of like a Greg Maddux, not in terms of quality. Obviously, Greg Maddux was in a
mm,
class by himself, but Greg Maddux didn't have
yeah,
this massive velocity, right? Neither does Lugo. He has a below average fastball. He doesn't have a great strikeout rate. It's good. It's okay. But somehow he limits hard contact. He strands runners on base. He's just someone that and I think he has a healthy arm. I think because he's not throwing 97, 98, 99, he's low 90s at best, right? 92, 93. Kind of his health has been decent over the last number of seasons, right? 5 seasons, 6 seasons, he's been really consistent. So he's fascinating to me. Whether he'd want to go back to the bullpen, I don't know. Um, you know, it's interesting. Maybe the Mets would want, Seth Lugo to share a game with another starter, right? You have a Kodai Senga, have him pitch 5 innings, bring in Seth Lugo to pitch four, and then bring in Edwin Diaz or see if Lugo can finish it out. I don't know. You'd have to have some hopefully really honest conversations with some of these pitchers.
You brought up something interesting just there, and I have actually written it down, but I hadn't implemented it here on the with the network or anything. The fact of using a two-starter game. That's an interesting proposal, and I thought about it, but it was a little bit wild. But now when you laid it out, Kodai Senga goes five and Seth Lugo goes your other half. That's a pretty interesting idea. Would the Mets entertain that? I absolutely think so. I think it would be a prime idea. Also, would give the bullpen a rest on that day. So instead of having a six-man rotation, so to speak, you're using two starters in one game. And if you don't end up needing it, meaning that other starter can go the next day to give the other side, that's actually kind of brilliant.
It
I
could be
will
really
definitely say.
interesting. I'm a big Luis Severino fan. I think he would be stoked to get off of the Athletics, even though they're not doing terrible, but they're pretty bad. Um, but as a number, I mean, is it such a big deal for the Mets to have five number 3 to 5 starters instead of a number one, really? I mean, to me, they don't have a single number one starter. They have twos, threes, fours,
No,
fives, and that's okay.
agreed.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think in this day and age of, you go and spend, 40 million a year on a number one starter, and then they're off with Tommy John and they're injured. So do you want to put that investment in those number one starters? That's a huge investment to put at risk. Whereas if you have these mid-level starters and you have some flexibility where, hey, you get a Seth Lugo, he's in that long relief role, but he can shift into starting, or you shift one of your current starters into a relief role. I don't think Clay Holmes would go for it, but maybe somebody else.
With Clay Holmes is interesting because he's on innings restriction. It's not he's gonna be. He's on innings restriction because he's coming from a relief position to start, and he's done brilliantly this year. You can't take away anything of what he's done. But that could also save innings for him. If you're going to worry about him reaching those innings, would it be a opportunity to bring in another starter and shift him? And then he could be a spot starter and the bullpen hand.
Well, or a
If the
playoff
question is, would
starter.
he want to do that? I can't. I
I think
can't
he's worked
answer.
really hard at being a star. I think he came over because he
Yeah,
wanted to start. So it could be difficult. But again, you want to think about the playoff push, right? Because if we think of the Mets ending with a record of 90 to 95 wins, 90 to 97 on the
what I
upside,
have.
way upside, right? 97 wins. So what would that be? 97 and 65 or whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah. 97. Yes.
Right.
97 and
And
65.
60,
Yes.
60, something like that, right? Yeah, 97,
Yeah.
65, somewhere between 97 and 65 and 90 and 72, right? 97, 65, they win the division. 90 and 72, they're a wild card and winning the division. I think that would probably be indicative of a little bit rougher, or at least they'd have to be pretty resilient in the playoffs to win the division title, right? If they're on the 97 and 65 place, I think their championship odds go up astronomically.
Absolutely. I
But
mean, obviously the Mets big. Sorry, Mike. Didn't mean to cut you off
no,
there.
no, go for it.
Obviously, the Mets' biggest competition is the Philadelphia Phillies. Their lineup is as stacked as the New York Mets. Their pitching is slightly better, but has had some rough goes over the last 2 weeks with unlucky plays and whatnot. It happens. It happens to the best of teams. But the Mets are yet to face the Phillies in the second half, and that's going to be a very, very closely watched series because any either one of them gets a little gap of 3 to 4 games, it's gonna become stressful for the one that's fighting to stay on top of the wild card because you have to keep in mind you got San Diego, Arizona, San Francisco, St. Louis, and Chicago all coming right behind it. So the
Yeah,
Mets have to play flawless ball to win the division. They have to play above average to make the playoffs.
right. I'd like to see, what I'd like to see I don't think they need to add too many bats. I think it'd be interesting to add at least look at Cedric Mullins or Luis Robert Jr. But to me, it would be fascinating if somehow they could pull it off. And I feel like Cohen is a wily enough fellow that he could pull off something where Ozuna gets traded a little bit before the All-Star, before the trading deadline to somebody else, and then they trade. Somehow the Mets pick him up. That would be fascinating to me. I don't think it'll happen. Atlanta's not going to make a direct trade with the Mets, I don't
I,
think.
I don't see Atlanta as sellers really because I think they're going to go into next year with what they have. But Ozuna could be interesting for me. The one name that I would love to see them somehow pull away, and you named him, Luis Robert Jr. I think he would be the perfect piece for center field. Not to take away anything from when Tyrone Taylor has done his job there and Jeff McNeil, when has played there, has done very well, but it's not a consistent starter there. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, I think
So,
Luis Robert has, I think he's like got 25, 26 stolen bases in the first half. And so,
yeah,
what was that guy that went down for injury for the Mets, the center fielder? He got injured. He was very fast, not much of a hitter, but so like a Luis Robert offers you um, speed, stolen bases. I think you got to think he's not going to stay at around 200. I think his second half stats, hopefully from a batting average on base percentage, will be better than 200 and 280 or whatever it was for him.
you also have to consider what team he's on. And no, it doesn't mean because he's on a bad team, that's why he's doing bad. There's nobody protecting him in the lineup. There's nobody giving him any type of advantage. Yeah, he gets on base. He's a 90% stolen base threat. So that's what I agree with you on. I think putting him in center field with his defense. And the question becomes, where does he fit in the lineup? And I plotted it out 2 or 3 times, and I moved Nimmo and put Robert into second
Yeah, and I think
or
also,
laid him
if
off.
I remember right, I think his options, he's in a little bit of a weird contract. There's not a mutual option. It's two so he has two, whatever, $19 million options that are for the club. So if he doesn't have a turnaround, the Mets just say,
You can
okay,
let him go. And you just got to be careful on what you're going to give up for him.
yeah,
But
but
if he has an
Mets are loaded, man.
explosive, yeah, but if he has an explosive second half, his control is via the clubhouse, it's via
Right,
the club itself, not him saying, "Oh, I want 50 million now." No, yeah, we
right.
got you for 2 more years at 19. That's a very key
And
point.
really, I think, while it would pain me a little bit to give up a Brett Beatty or a Vientos, like their consistency has been troubling. And right now, if you look at some of the reports coming out of the Mets minor league system, there are other people coming up who, you know what? And I love this. I saw Derek Jeter once give an interview, I think recently gave an interview where he said, every year, even though I'm, Derek Jeter, I felt like there was some young kid who was coming up to take my job. And I think that the Mets now have a system where there are some people coming out of the blue. These aren't the trade acquisitions for, whoever a couple seasons ago. These are just guys who've been developed and nurtured in the Met system who might emerge. You might see, I mean, I think Pete Crow Armstrong always had good skills, but you never think he's going to become Pete Crow Armstrong, right? But they may have someone
Fair enough.
who comes out of the system, and all of a sudden, so what? You give up a Brett Beatty or a Vientos for the right person. It's not like a couple years ago where if you give up a Brett Beatty, like we got no one left in our system. Right now, the Mets have a system and they're developing players. I also think the Mets may, they, you know, they have that talent to trade both in the farm system, but also, a Starling Marte could be very valuable to the right team. And I think while that might not make Juan Soto happy, I think hopefully Juan Soto's salary will get him over it. But I think you could see a Starling Marte get moved. Um,
And we've talked about that as well. Mike and myself, we had spoken about how Marte could be a good piece now that he's having a more consistent year than last year. He's a very valuable DH piece to almost any team, but you're going to want to pair him with something to be able to grab something big.
yeah, he might be part of a package deal where you have a Starling Marte and either two minor league prospects or even Rhett Beatty and a minor league prospect. I think that's not a, depending on who the prospect is, maybe a pitching prospect. But
Well, I don't
maybe.
think the Mets are going to move Sporat or Tom. They're
No, they're
untouchable.
untouchable, yeah. But no, I think you have a good shot at I think you have a good shot at getting some really good talent. And I also think the Mets, if they see a huge name that they might inquire about some folks that everybody assumes are unmovable, and you never know. I mean, you gotta talk to Pittsburgh and see what's possible. I'm not necessarily thinking of the big one, the big whale, but they have two other pitchers there that would be quite worth
We'd
it.
all love Paul Skeens, yes.
But I think,
But
listen, I
Mitch
mean,
Keller is an option. Yep.
you have to talk to everybody. You have to talk to the Angels. You have Tyler Anderson there. You have to talk to teams like the Rangers about Chris Martin in relief role. Nick Martinez on the Reds are interesting because Nick Martinez it can be a starter or a reliever. He's kind of been in that place. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I love Harrison Bader. I don't think that's a match for the Mets, but he's just a good guy.
Not anymore.
But
Not
no, I
anymore.
mean,
I loved him when he was here, though.
I think they should stay away from Brian Hayes. That's not worth it. Um, Charlie Morton's interesting on some level, but perhaps too much risk in terms of I don't know, but he's interesting. So there's lots of stuff out there. I don't think the Nationals will trade Kyle Finnegan to the Mets. I don't think so, but you never know. So there's definitely some interesting pieces out there. Ryan Helsley, Cardinals. I think that. I mean, look at him. He's in a contract year, so it's a rental. He's been a little rougher this year, but still, fourth best WAR there going on, and um, I don't know. His fastball's been getting ripped. I just watched some a reel where he's watching over and over people destroying his fastball. But um, Cade Smith. I mean, I don't think they'll trade him, but that would be fascinating from Cleveland.
Yeah, you've definitely picked out a lot of the right names who the Mets could target. But if you could have one besides Ozuna, if you could have one without any strings attached, who would you want to put on the team now?
I think as a reliever, Cade Smith. I don't think they're going to trade him, but if they could get him, I think also they're going to be competing. Like Guardians are going to bend, the Dodgers, Philly, Mets, Yankees, Cubs over a barrel, right? And say who's going to give us the best price. But from a listen, the kid's got 4 years of control left, team control. I mean, probably the best in baseball, best reliever in baseball since 2024. I mean, that's enough of a sample size. He's a
Yeah.
strikeout. He's a strikeout guy. Um, so, so figuring out, right? I mean, imagine a Cade Smith leading to a uh, closer, right? Leading to Edwin Diaz,
That would be a dream right there.
right?
That would
Um,
be a dream right there.
and even imagine if you could pick up a Griffin Jacks and a Cade Smith. Although they're both right, are they both right-handers? I think so.
Griffin Jacks is, and let me tell you, I've been very high on him as well. I've talked about him on the network the last 2 weeks. I would love to see a deal that brings Griffin Jacks to the Mets.
Yeah, so I could see, and then you have, I think some of your other relievers would perform better on the Mets that have been having a little tougher second half of the leading up to the All-Star break. I think you might see that. But Cade Smith might, I don't think they're going to go for it. It's a very high price. You're going to have to give up one of those pitching prospects from the minor leagues for one, along
Okay.
with,
I mean,
yeah,
if he was available, I would understand that. But as I just said, I don't think that with the rotation as thin and shaky, I think Sporad and Tong are not going to be touched. But hey, it's baseball. You never know. Now,
I
go
think
ahead.
if it was a second place to Cade Smith, I would think Bednar from the Pirates would be a really good pickup because he's 30 years old, so he's not 27, and that makes a big difference. Um, he's been people have been swinging and missing, man. He's getting people a whiff, and so if you look at his last, I don't know, 15, 20 outings, he's been really solid. And I think he's not going to command the price tag of a Cade Smith, not even anything close, probably a quarter of the price tag of a Cade Smith.
And those are good options. And it's great to hear other perspectives. And Mike had brought up a few that I hadn't looked at, and I'm sure Mike Briskin has been on the ball, and he actually has some of those names. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Mike, is that you're out in Denver, and you said you go to a lot of Rockies games, and you said when the Mets were in town. What is the atmosphere like there with the state of the organization the way it is?
I wish that Rockies attendees or fans, whatever you want to call them, would. I mean, it's a great ball. It's a great stadium. It's really pleasant, wonderful experience going. But I wish they would go and refuse to buy any concessions, because that might actually encourage the Rockies ownership to sell. And like Denver has amazing sports teams. When you look at the Nuggets and you look at the Avalanche, um, look at the NFL, right? I mean, you have in those teams elite teams that fans are rabid for. Now, the Rockies, people are like, oh yeah, it was a fun experience. Oh yeah, I could get tickets for $7 and move down. Like, so, but the problem is that the Rockies owner is still making money like crazy. He's still making enough money to keep himself happy, yet he doesn't care. He does not. I don't believe they care at all about winning. They just know that this is a revenue stream. And gosh, I want an owner to be ticked off, right? I want a Mark Cuban who wants results. Um, and it's not always about spending the money, as much money as you can. But come on, you're telling me if the Rockies, doubled their salaries, their payroll, and really competed, I think the Rockies Denver fans would come out even more in droves, and you'd have a rabid fan base. But that's never going to happen with the current ownership, and it's just pathetic for Major League Baseball to allow a Rockies team that probably would get beat up by many of the AAA teams of other organizations to exist. I mean, it's just a shame because it's a gorgeous stadium. It's a wonderful, pleasant fan experience. They're doing a lot of stuff in downtown Denver to connect some of the stadiums and really make it even nicer. But gosh, it's just tough because even if they have glimmers of hope, then they trade away those hopes because those players just say, I'm tired of it. I don't want to be on a team for my career. Why would I sign here long term? Why would I do that?
Most eloquently put, if I may say. Yesterday was a very, not yesterday, sorry, Saturday was a very special day in the Mets organization, as number 5 was put up for his number retired at Citi Field. Number 5, David Wright, retired a few years ago and has finally got his number retired by Steve Cohen and Dave Stearns in the Mets organization. I saw obviously the whole presentation. I was watching it. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but I would like to get your reaction on it.
I thought it was wonderful. I think that it was well deserved. I think that um, I think that Steve Cohen's been trying to do more of that, really honor the generations of Mets. And I think that helps connect them to the team and kind of create a continuity. So if, people like us who can, we're just old enough to really be aware and get excited about 1986, right? All of a sudden we're also saying, but we're excited about 2026 too, right? And so it connects for us our entire kind of Mets existence together, and then every step in between. And I think that that's beautiful. And there's a part of me that says I'm so sad that David Wright didn't get to experience the Steve Cohen era, right, where he would have even had more surrounding castmates who could have helped him really lock in a couple, World Series
Mhm.
and more. But I think it's wonderful, and I think hopefully it was a sweet um, healing for David Wright because he could have, without his back, he could have played for another 3 or 4 years, I think, very effectively. And this, I think, was quite wonderful. I actually think maybe he could have played a couple more years if the DH had been in effect then. Maybe it's a lot of torque to swing, so I don't know, but I think it's really wonderful that he had that sweetness, and his family, who did not know him as a player, really, right? Just from video,
Right.
they got to see this love from a fan base. Um, yeah, and I thought all the people who were there were quite appropriate. All this nonsense about who wasn't there, that's silly. You had Jose Reyes. That's the only person you really needed there, right? They played
Right.
side by side for quite a while and had this bond. People like to people like to throw shade on things and try to say who wasn't there, and that's nonsense. I think it was lovely.
And I have to say, the fact that it rained as he came up to the podium was kind of sentimental a little bit as God cried as one of the best Mets retired. But I have to say, I think it was very nicely done. Uh, like Mike said, his kids really didn't get to see him play, but they now got to experience the love that he shared, as Mike said, when he took the field and stood on that golden third base and everything. And besides his wife, I think his kids were really awestruck by it. And that's the person he was. He was a very humble person. You didn't see him in the news about doing illegal stuff, just like you never saw Jeter, and he was a clean ball player. Unfortunately, his time ended, like Mike said, 3 or 4 years early due to a bad back. Unfortunately, we know a few people who've gone through that. Um, but seeing number five retire definitely got that stadium amped, and the Mets winning 3-2 kind of helped. The Mets winning on Sunday 3-2, kind of helped it a little bit. The Mets will head over to, I believe it's St. Louis next, and we'll see what happens. I have one last question for you, Mike. When are
Yeah.
you coming to New York so we can go and hang out?
That'd be lovely. Well, one thing on David right before that, I think
Yeah,
he's gonna wait till his kids grow up, but I think from a temperament standpoint, from a baseball standpoint, this is someone the Mets should keep on their radar in terms of future leadership, in terms
absolutely.
of even in the front office, but perhaps even on the field. I think he could be. I think right now he's really into his family and coaching his kids' baseball team, so he's not interested
Yeah,
in MLB. But I think that would be fascinating down the road, 10 years down the road, to see that. Because like
he
he's
is a
such a
hitting coach or something.
yeah, or even listen. I think he has a temperament to be a manager. I mean, I really do, or front office, right? A assistant
Mhm.
GM kind of. It could be. Who knows if that's what he wants. But I don't really care at the end of the day. It's his life. But he's just a good guy. Yeah, I hope to come to New York. I think we're heading there in actually September. So beginning of
Good.
September, we're taking a little trip. So
Then
I will hit you up.
please do. Please like and subscribe on this video. Follow us on the network at www.thesportsinsanitynetwork.com for all your blogs and vlogs. Check us out on X at S Insanity Real. I want to thank Mike for coming on with me, my brother, for believe it or not, over 30 years.
Yep.
Grew up here in Westchester County, New York. Mike has found his way over to Denver. We might be far away, but technology keeps us closer together. This is going to be a ongoing podcast between me and Mike. We're hoping to be able to do it every Monday afternoon, and you'll be able to get a nice outside perspective out of the network on what we talk about going with the New York Mets. Mike, again, thank you for taking your time out of your busy
Of
schedule to
course, it's
come
a
talk some
pleasure.
baseball with your younger brother, your younger, much looking brother. And to all our fans out there, we will see you during the week for Batters Up, and tune in probably for Bombers Banters tonight with Danny Boy Reginald and Bill Corpus Crispy Murphy. Otherwise, this is the old Ops guy saying we'll catch you on the flip side and have a good day.